Communications Officer Kira rubbed her tired eyes and stared at the glowing screen in front of her. She had been working the night shift at Galactic Monitoring Station for 3 years, but she had never seen anything like this. The signal kept repeating over and over, making that annoying beeping sound that wouldn't stop. SOS, SOS. This is Earth Station Alpha. Catastrophic system failure. Requesting immediate assistance. The voice sounded desperate, but also strangely calm. Kira turned up the volume and listened carefully. The signal was using old electromagnetic waves, the kind of technology that most planets stopped using thousands of years ago. It was like finding someone still using smoke signals in a world of instant messaging. Her colleague Vex walked over, carrying 2 cups of hot stimulant drink. His long, thin fingers wrapped around the warm cup as he leaned over Kira's shoulder to look at her screen. The blue light from the monitor reflected off his large, dark eyes. "That's been going on for hours," Kira said, taking a sip of her drink. "I've never heard anything like it. Where's it coming from?" Vex asked, his antenna moving slightly as he concentrated on the display. Kira pressed a few buttons, and the star map appeared on the bigger screen. A small red dot blinked in the far corner, way out in the empty space where most civilized species never bothered to go. Outer Rim. "There's a small planet orbiting a young star out there." She touched the screen and made the image larger. Numbers and data started flowing across the display, making both of them frown. "Look at these readings, Vex. This system is completely crazy." The data showed dangerous levels of radiation coming from the star. Weather patterns on the planet were wild and unpredictable, with massive storms spinning across its surface. The planet itself seemed to shake and move, like it couldn't stay still. "Any life signs?" Vex asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Kira shook her head slowly. "Too far away to get clear readings. But somebody is definitely broadcasting that distress call, and they've been doing it for a long time." They both stared at the screen in silence. The red dot kept blinking, and the voice kept repeating its desperate message. Vex's antenna twitched nervously, something he only did when he was really worried. "We should report this to command," he said quietly. "That whole system looks dangerous. I mean, really dangerous." Kira nodded and reached for the communication panel. Something told her this was going to be more complicated than a simple rescue. Mission. Commander Tor stood in the main briefing room of the rescue vessel Sanctuary, looking at his assembled crew, 23 beings from different planets, all experienced in emergency rescue operations. They had saved thousands of lives over the years, but something about this mission felt different. "Listen up, everyone," Tor began, his deep voice filling the room. "We got a distress signal from a planet called Earth, way out in the Outer Rim. 3 ships are going with us, medical team, engineering team, and enough supplies for whatever we might find." He pressed a button, and the wall screen lit up with data about Earth. The numbers made several crew members gasp quietly. "The planet shows extreme conditions," Tor continued. "Massive storms covering the entire surface, ground that never stops shaking, and the atmosphere." He paused, looking at the readings again. "The atmosphere appears to be highly corrosive." Dr. Nell, a tall, thin being with 4 arms, raised one of her hands. As the chief medical officer, she had seen many dangerous situations. "Commander, these radiation levels are off the charts. Nothing we know of should be able to survive on that planet's surface. The star system is pumping out deadly energy. Yet someone is broadcasting a distress call," Tor replied, walking to the navigation panel. "They've been calling for help for weeks. We can't ignore that." The crew began preparing for departure, but Tor could see the worry in their faces. He called out to them as they headed to their stations. "Triple-check all environmental suits. Make sure the backup systems are working, and I want extra shielding on all 3 ships." The journey to the Sol system took 2 days. As they got closer, their instruments began making alarming sounds. Warning lights flashed red across all the control panels. "Sir," called Navigator Zen from her station, her voice tight with concern. "The solar radiation is getting stronger. This star is incredibly violent, and there are debris fields everywhere. Looks like planets got smashed to pieces out here." But it was what Zen discovered next that made the entire crew go silent. "Commander, I'm detecting massive storm systems across the whole planet. Winds. That would tear our ships apart. But that's not the worst part." She looked up from her instruments, her face pale. "The surface is covered with liquid water. Everywhere." The crew exchanged horrified glances. Everyone knew about liquid water, the universal solvent that could dissolve almost anything. No civilization used it, except in carefully controlled laboratory conditions. Yet this planet was covered in it. "How could anything survive in that?" whispered Engineer Baum. Nobody had an answer. Commander Tor adjusted the communication settings. One more time. His hands were shaking slightly as he reached for the transmitter. After days of traveling through dangerous space, they were finally close enough to talk to whoever was sending that desperate distress signal. "Earth Station Alpha, this is Galactic Rescue Vessel Sanctuary. We received your distress signal. Please, respond." The bridge went completely quiet. Every crew member stopped what they were doing and listened. For almost a minute, there was nothing but static crackling through the speakers. Then, suddenly, a voice came through the noise. "Sanctuary, this is Station Alpha. Thank God, we've been trying to reach someone for weeks." The voice sounded surprisingly calm and relaxed. Tor had expected panic, fear, maybe crying. Instead, the person talking sounded like they were having a normal conversation over lunch. "We've had a complete power failure down here," the voice continued cheerfully. "Main systems went offline about 3 weeks ago. We've been running everything manually since then." Commander Tor leaned closer to the microphone. Something about the way the humans said down here bothered him. "Down where?" he asked carefully. "Deep Sea Research Facility, about 4 kilometers, under the Pacific Ocean. We're currently running on backup power systems and manual operation of life support." Dr. Nell, who had been drinking water, choked and nearly dropped her scanner. The cup fell from her forehands and shattered on the floor. 4 kilometers underwater. She quickly calculated the pressure in her head. The crushing weight would be enormous, enough to flatten any ship they had ever built. Engineer. Baum looked at his instruments and shook his head in disbelief. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Nothing could survive that pressure." Commander Tor tried to keep his voice steady. How many survivors are at your location?" "All 12 of us are fine," came the cheerful reply. "We're actually more worried about missing our monthly supply drop. We're running pretty low on coffee, and Jin is getting grumpy without his morning cup." The entire bridge crew stared at each other in shock. Dr. Nell pulled up the pressure readings on her medical scanner. The numbers were so high they barely fit on the screen. "They're talking about coffee," she whispered. "They are 4 kilometers underwater, surrounded by enough pressure to crush a battleship, and they're worried about coffee." In the background of the transmission, they could hear laughter and someone making jokes about fixing equipment. These beings weren't just surviving in impossible conditions, they sounded happy. The rescue team spent hours working on their environmental suits, adding layer after layer of protection. Engineer Paz had never seen modifications like this before. They needed extra shielding for radiation, pressure regulators that could handle impossible conditions, and heating systems powerful enough to keep them alive. "Look at these gravity readings," Paz muttered, checking his instruments for the 10th time. 9.8 meters per second squared. That's almost twice what we can handle. How are we supposed to work in that? Commander Tor watched his crew struggle with the equipment. Every piece of gear needed to be reinforced. Even their strongest materials might not be enough. "Station Alpha, we're having some difficulty reaching your location," Tor said into the communicator. trying to sound professional. The environmental conditions around your facility are, well, they're quite extreme. The human voice came back immediately, sounding as relaxed as ever. Oh, you mean the volcanic vents? Yeah, they're pretty active this season. We had a big eruption last week that shook the whole station. Nothing to worry about though. We've got thermal regulators to handle the heat. Engineer Paz stared at his readings in complete shock. His scanner showed superheated gases hot enough to melt their ship's hull. The pressure readings were so high, they would crush any known species instantly, and the temperature outside the thermal vents was barely above freezing. They're surrounded by conditions that would kill us in seconds, he whispered to Dr. Nell. How are they even alive? Through the communication link, they could hear the humans talking casually in the background. It sounded like a normal workplace conversation. Hey Min, can you help me fix the reactor cooling system? One voice called out. Sure thing. Right after I finished checking the hull integrity outside, another replied. Dr. Nell's eyes went wide. Outside, she whispered. Did they just say someone is going outside? In that pressure? In those temperatures? Commander Tor quickly grabbed the communicator. Station Alpha, please confirm you're sending personnel outside your facility. Oh? Yeah, just routine maintenance, the human replied cheerfully. Jin's our best diver. He can hold his breath for about 4 minutes, so he can get to the damaged section and back, no problem. The entire medical team sat in stunned silence. Dr. Nell looked at her pressure readings again, convinced her instruments were broken. No living being could survive outside in those conditions, even for a few seconds. Yet this Jin person was apparently going to swim around in crushing depths, holding his breath, like it was a normal Tuesday afternoon. 4 minutes, she whispered. They think 4 minutes underwater in that pressure is normal. Dr. Nell sat at her workstation, staring at numbers that made no sense. Her hands trembled as she typed up the environmental report. She had studied deadly planets for 20 years, but nothing had prepared her for this. Commander, she called out, her voice shaky. I've finished the assessment. This planet, ... It's a Class 12 Deathworld. Commander Tor walked over and looked at her screen. Class the 12th was the highest danger rating they had. It meant conditions so deadly that even their most advanced technology couldn't protect them. The atmospheric pressure alone would crush most species like empty cans, Dr. Nell continued. And the oxygen levels there so high they would poison us within minutes. The temperature changes happen so fast, they would kill anything within hours. Yet 12 humans are not only surviving, but working normally, Tor replied, his voice grim. They're doing routine maintenance in conditions that would wipe out entire civilizations. The more they learned about Earth, the more impossible it seemed. The humans had mentioned something called hurricane season, like it was no big deal. When Dr. Nell looked it up, she found massive storm systems with winds over 200 kilometers per hour, fast enough to tear their rescue ships apart. The humans also talked about earthquake preparedness, as if the ground shaking violently was just a normal part of life. They had emergency kits and practice drills, like they expected their planet to try to kill them regularly. But the most disturbing thing was something called winter. During this season, temperatures dropped so low that water, that dangerous universal solvent covering most of their planet, actually turned solid. Vast regions became frozen wastelands, yet humans continued living there like nothing happened. Sir, Communications Officer Kira called from her station, looking confused. The humans are asking if we want to meet them at something called the surface. They said the weather's really nice today. What are the conditions? Tor asked. Kira checked her readings, and her face went pale. They say it's only 35 degrees Celsius, with 90% humidity. They think that's good weather. The entire crew stared at the environmental data on the main screen. The temperature was hot enough to cook most species slowly. The humidity meant the air was so thick with water vapor, that breathing would be like drowning on dry land. They think that's nice weather, Engineer Pass whispered in amazement. What do they consider bad weather? Someone asked from the back. Nobody wanted to know the answer to that question. Looking at this alien encounter scene, I'll expand it into engaging storytelling that keeps readers hooked while maintaining that natural human feel. Dr. Nels, scanning. Equipment started beeping frantically, then began smoking at the edges. She slapped the side of the machine, hoping it was just another malfunction. But the readings kept coming back the same, impossible, terrifying, and absolutely real. Run. The scan again, she whispered to her assistant, whose 4 eyes were wide with disbelief. The numbers didn't change. These creatures calling themselves humans had bones 3 times denser than any known species in the galaxy. Their blood carried oxygen levels that should have killed them instantly. Most shocking of all, their immune systems were simultaneously fighting off dozens of different diseases and winning. Dr. Nell had studied biology across 17 different worlds. She'd seen creatures that could survive in acid, beings that lived in pure radiation, and organisms that thrived in the vacuum of space. But nothing had prepared her for this. The humans continued their casual conversation, completely unaware that they were walking impossibilities. They talked about something called broken bones, like it was a minor inconvenience. They mentioned recovering from something called the flu, as if it were perfectly normal to survive a pathogen invasion. One human, who identified himself as Jin, even complained about a recent injury to his ankle. According to the scans, this injury would have permanently crippled any other known life form. Yet Jin was walking around normally, treating it like a temporary annoyance. Dr. Nell finally gathered enough courage to ask the question that was burning through her scientific mind. Station Alpha, we need to understand something. How do you survive in such extreme conditions? Your biology should be impossible. There was a pause, then something that sounded like laughter came through the communications system. Extreme conditions. Jin's voice carried genuine confusion. What do you mean? This is just a regular Tuesday for us. Though, I'll admit the water's been pretty chilly lately. It's only sitting at about 2 degrees Celsius this month. Dr. Nell's scanner confirmed the temperature reading. 2 degrees above the freezing point of water, the universal solvent that made up most of these creatures' bodies. They were working in conditions that would turn their own life fluid into solid crystals, and they were calling it chilly. Another human voice joined the conversation. Oh, you think this is extreme? Sue sounded almost amused. Jin, remember last winter when it hit -20? Now that was properly cold. Had to wear an extra jacket. Or that time during the heat wave when it reached 45 degrees, Jin added. That was rough. Had to drink water every few hours. Dr. Nell's species required climate-controlled environments that varied by less than 1 degree. These humans were describing temperature swings that covered nearly 70 degrees of their measurement scale, and they were treating it like weather small talk. We evolved here on Earth, Sue explained, as if that made everything perfectly reasonable. It's always been like this. Honestly, you should visit during storm season. That's when things get really interesting. Last year we had winds that could knock down trees, and people were out there securing their homes, like it was just another weekend project. The more the humans talked, the more Dr. Nell realized that first contact with humanity wasn't just a diplomatic milestone. It was a complete revision of what life could possibly be in the universe. The archival team had been working in shifts for 3 days straight, diving deeper into Earth's historical records. What they found made even the most seasoned researchers question everything they thought they knew about life in the universe. Archivist Ven burst into the command center, clutching data tablets with trembling hands. Her normally calm demeanor had completely cracked. Commander Tor, you need to see this immediately. The geological records. They're beyond anything we've ever documented. The main screen lit up with Earth's timeline, and the room fell silent. Red markers dotted the planet's history like a disease spreading across the display. Each marker represented a catastrophic event that should have wiped out all life. "This can't be accurate," someone whispered from the back of the room, but the data was undeniable. Earth had endured not one, not two, but dozens of mass extinction events. Massive asteroids had slammed into the surface with the force of billions of nuclear weapons. Volcanic supereruptions had blocked out the sun for years at a time, turning the entire planet into a frozen wasteland. "Look at this period here." Ven pointed to a particularly brutal section of the timeline. The entire planet was covered in ice for thousands of years. Solid water everywhere. Surface temperatures dropped so low that most of the oceans froze solid. Dr. Nell leaned forward, studying the readings more carefully. "And the humans survived this." "Not just survived." Ven's voice cracked with disbelief. "They thrived. Every single catastrophic event that should have ended their species instead pushed them to evolve faster, become stronger, develop new survival strategies." The research team began pulling up more recent data about human settlements. What they discovered made the ancient catastrophes seem almost mild by comparison. Humans had built their largest cities directly on top of massive geological fault lines, areas where the planet's crust regularly shifted and cracked. They called these events earthquakes and treated them like minor inconveniences. Some humans even collected data about these disasters as a hobby. "They live on active volcanic sites," another researcher called out, his voice filled with horror. "Millions of them build homes right next to mountains that regularly explode with molten rock." Dr. Nell pulled up the communication logs from their recent conversations with the human station. "Commander, they mentioned something called Death Valley where they go for vacation. I thought it was just a colorful name." She ran the environmental scan data through the computer. The results made everyone in the room take a step backward. "The surface temperature in this vacation spot reaches 56 degrees Celsius, Dr. Nell announced. "That's hot enough to cook most known life forms, and they go there voluntarily, for fun." Commander Tor stared at the data streaming across the screens. These weren't just survivors of a harsh world. These were beings who had been forged by constant catastrophe, shaped by disasters that would destroy entire civilizations. "They don't just survive impossible conditions," he said slowly, the full realization hitting him. "They actively seek them out for entertainment." The Deathworld had created something unprecedented in the galaxy, a species that found relaxation in conditions that would be considered torture chambers on any other planet. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation had been called, within hours of receiving the xenobiology team's final report. Representatives from 47 different worlds sat in stunned silence as the data scrolled across their screens. Dr. Nell stood at the center of the chamber, her hands shaking slightly as she prepared to deliver news that would change everything. "They thought they knew about life in the universe. Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying across the vast assembly hall. "After extensive analysis, we can confirm that Earth registers as a Class 12 Deathworld, the highest classification in our databases." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the audience. Class 12 worlds were theoretical nightmares. Planets so hostile that the Confederation had assumed no complex life could possibly exist on them. "But that's not the most disturbing part," Dr. Nell continued. "The humans living on this death world consider their environment perfectly normal. When we describe the conditions on our own homeworlds, they called them comfortable and relaxing. The implications hit the assembly like a shockwave. If these humans could thrive in the most extreme conditions imaginable, what would happen when they encountered normal worlds?" Ambassador Zeta, from the peaceful garden world of Serenity Prime, raised a trembling appendage. "Dr. Nell, what would happen if these humans were to visit other planets in the galaxy?" The question everyone had been dreading hung in the air like a toxic cloud. "Based on our analysis," Dr. Nell replied carefully, "humans would find every other known world in the galaxy to be essentially a paradise. The conditions that we consider optimal for life would be laughably easy for them to handle. The chamber erupted in worried chatter. Species that had evolved on gentle worlds, with stable climates and predictable weather patterns, were suddenly faced with the reality of beings who treated natural disasters as minor inconveniences. Communications Officer Kira stepped forward, her voice barely audible over the concerned discussions. There's more. During our conversations, the humans expressed significant interest in something they call space exploration. They spoke about it with genuine excitement. The silence that followed was deafening. They want to visit other worlds, she continued. They asked detailed questions about our homeworld's climate, atmospheric composition, and gravity levels. When I described our planet's comfortable 18-degree temperature and gentle 0.7 gravity, they said it sounded like the perfect place for a vacation. Commander Tor, who had remained silent throughout the briefing, finally spoke up. What you're telling us is that we've discovered a species that could colonize any planet in the galaxy without breaking a sweat. Dr. Nell nodded grimly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Their biology is so adapted to extreme conditions that they could probably set up thriving colonies on worlds we've classified as uninhabitable. Desert planets, frozen wastelands, high radiation zones, all of these would be simple challenges for humans to overcome. The assembly sat in contemplative silence, each delegate imagining what it would mean to share the galaxy with beings who considered apocalyptic conditions to be just another day at the office. The age of galactic expansion was about to change forever. What had started as a simple rescue mission had transformed into the most significant event in galactic history. The crew of the Confederation vessel sat in their climate-controlled bridge, still trying to process everything they had learned about these impossible beings called humans. Commander Tor took a deep breath of carefully filtered air and opened communications one final time. Station Alpha, we've successfully completed repairs to your communication array. The replacement components should hold up well in your unique environmental conditions. That's fantastic news. Jin's voice came through clearly now, free of the static that had plagued their earlier conversations. We really can't thank you enough for the help. Our supply ship should be here within the week, so we'll be back to full operations soon. The commander found himself genuinely curious about what full operations meant for beings who worked in conditions that would kill his crew in minutes. But some questions were better left unasked. Hey, listen, Jin continued, his tone brightening with what sounded like genuine enthusiasm. If you and your crew ever want to visit Earth, we'd absolutely love to show you around. There's so much to see. The Grand Canyon is absolutely breathtaking, especially at sunset. Or if you prefer something cooler, you could visit Antarctica. It's really beautiful this time of year. Commander Tor felt a chill that had nothing to do with his ship's temperature controls. These humans were casually inviting them to visit places that sounded like they belonged in a horror story. He'd seen the data on Antarctica, a frozen wasteland, where temperatures dropped so low that the planet's own atmosphere would condense into liquid. That's very generous of you, Tor replied diplomatically, but I'm afraid our species requires very specific environmental conditions. We wouldn't want to be a burden on your hospitality. The truth was that visiting Earth would require environmental suits more advanced than anything they used for deep space exploration. His crew would need life support systems just to survive in what humans called nice weather. We do have a proposal of our own, Tor continued, steering the conversation toward safer ground. Our people would be very interested in sharing space travel technology with your species. Based on what we've observed, you seem remarkably well suited for exploration beyond your homeworld. There was excited chatter in the background of the human communication, voices discussing possibilities and expressing genuine enthusiasm about exploring the galaxy. The commander felt a mix of admiration and terror at their eagerness. The real truth behind his offer was much more strategic. After extensive discussions with the Confederation leadership, they'd reached a unanimous conclusion. It was far better to encourage humans to spread out across the galaxy than to leave them concentrated on their impossibly dangerous homeworld. At least in space, other species would have advance warning before encountering them. Trade routes could be adjusted, colonies could be relocated, and diplomatic protocols could be established. As the rescue fleet prepared to depart, Dr. Nell was already updating the galactic databases with new classifications and warnings. Her final report would become required reading for every xenobiologist in the Confederation. Earth, Class 12 Deathworld, she typed carefully. Inhabitants, extremely friendly, but biologically indestructible. Approach with extreme caution and full environmental protection. Recommend immediate integration into galactic community to prevent isolation-induced territorial expansion. Note: species exhibits disturbing tendency to seek out dangerous conditions for recreational purposes. The humans had gathered at their observation deck to wave goodbye, their cheerful voices carrying across the communication channel as they expressed hopes for future meetings and cultural exchanges. "We're really looking forward to beach season starting up," one of them mentioned casually as the alien ships began their departure sequence. None of the Confederation crew asked what horrors beach season might entail. Some knowledge was too dangerous to possess.